Chapter 49-23. After weighing the pros and cons, Yuhan decided to help Xueqi. After all, no one knew if they would encounter the same situation and their lives would be in the hands of others. As Yuhan shattered the light that was charging the spatial eye in front of Xueqi, the spatial eye seemed to stagnate and its power did not continue to increase. However, before everyone could relax, they saw the energy of the spatial eye begin to increase again. Once the spatial eye grew to a certain extent, Xueqi would probably be killed by the power of the spatial eye. This time, Quan Tianxin of the North Star tribe said bluntly, "That light is in my space. I will shatter it." At this time, Quan Tianxin could be said to have made a good guess about the situation. His position was on the right side of Yuhan. So, first Yuhan made the decision, then he made the decision. If there was no accident, it would be Jiang Xinwu, and then Gu Xinyue. It could be said that except for Xueqi, who couldn't move, if anyone else wanted Xueqi dead, Xueqi wouldn't be able to live. This was very simple. In such a situation, no one dared to joke around with their own lives. Who knew if it would be their turn later? Therefore, he would help as much as he could. Moreover, if everyone gathered together, there would be strength in numbers, and it would be more suitable for the next operation. In any case, there wasn't any deep hatred between them, and there wasn't even a conflict of interest, so there was no need to kill anyone else. As Quan Tianxin made a move and shattered the light that appeared in his area, then the light that appeared in Kong Xinmu's area also appeared. All of this coincided with everyone's guess. There was no need to say what to do next. When Kong Xinmu shattered the light that appeared in his area, Gu Xinyue also shattered the light that appeared in her area. After the four of them shattered the light, Xueqi said in a deep voice, "I can move, but the spatial eye is still there, and it is still accumulating energy." Everyone's faces were filled with shock. They found that the light that was charging the spatial eye this time was actually above the head of the strange statue. Above their heads was a place that the 5 separated spaces could not reach. It was a forbidden area. In other words, no one could save Xueqi now. However, the difference was that Xueqi could move now. This should be the statue's test for her. As the power of the spatial eye continued to gather, Xueqi also made the most dependable preparations. On one hand, he planned to block the attack of the spatial eye, and on the other hand, he tried to think of a way to destroy the spatial eye. This little girl, compared to you, she is still a little lacking. The strength of this spatial eye is not weak. I'm afraid that she will not be able to withstand it. Can you help her? The demon god ancestor's voice resounded in Kong Xinmu's mind. Kong Xinmu was a little helpless. Right now, I can't pass through the spatial barrier, even my power can't pass through it. I've already tried it just now, how can I help her? Did you forget that you have the devouring power? The devouring power, as long as you use it properly, can completely devour these spatial barriers. The demon god ancestor said matter-of-factly. Of course, your current level of power is still too weak, and you may not be able to do anything about these barriers. But who told you that you must go through to help her? Listen up. This noble one is a 16-winged heavenly demon god. Right now, these so-called 16-winged heavenly demon god inheritances are really too weak. Although I have already taught them some methods before, I did not let them unlock all of their powers. This noble one, the source of power of a 16-winged heavenly demon god, comes from the 16 wings. To this noble one, the 16 wings, to this noble one, are like your hands and dragon claws. It is something that is inherent to this noble one. Once the seal is unlocked, there will be great power. This process, this noble one calls unlocking the wings. This noble one has tried unlocking the wings a total of 15 times, and the last time, I could not succeed no matter what. This noble one also has some doubts about my bloodline, but let's not discuss this for now. Let's talk about the royal family of the demon god clan. They don't seem to know the method of unlocking the wings at all. That's true, this noble one has left behind many inheritance relics. These royal family of the demon god clan are probably the family that obtained the inheritance from this noble one. My method of unlocking the wings was not recorded in the relics at all. My soul only woke up when I met that little girl. Otherwise, Tessa, I would still be sleeping in that so-called sacred relic of the demon god clan. Without further ado, I will tell you about the situation of unlocking the wings. Since the body of a 16-winged heavenly demon god has obtained the inheritance of this noble one, then the power of the bloodline must be obtained. You can try unlocking the wings. The first 4 attempts aren't too difficult, but there is still a considerable amount of danger involved. This is somewhat similar to the ancient Phoenix clan's nirvana. When the wings are unlocked, whatever power is fused into them, the unlocked wings will have that type of power. Now, the power of the Eye of Space is considered quite high. If she can fuse that power into her own wings, then this little girl's strength won't be too weak. Boy, do as I say and teach the first method of unlocking the wings to that little girl. As the consciousness of the demon god ancestor was transmitted to Kong Shinmu, more information regarding the unlocking of the wings appeared in his mind. This information could be said to be a priceless treasure to the royal family of the demon god clan, but it was impossible for Kong Shinmu to divulge all of it. Therefore, Kong Shinmu only intercepted a portion of the information, which was the first method of unlocking the wings, and transmitted it to Xueqi through sound transmission. This is the method of unlocking the wings of a 16-winged heavenly demon god. It is very useful for increasing your strength, and in this current situation, it just happens to be suitable for you to use this method. You can use this method to fuse with the power of the Eye of Space and open your first wing. From then on, you will be able to fuse with the power of the Eye of Space, allowing that wing of yours to have an even stronger special ability. As this information was transmitted, Xueqi was so shocked that he didn't know what to say. Unlocking the wings? A method to increase the strength of a 16-winged heavenly demon god? Although many people of the royal family of the demon god clan suspected that the demon soul of the 16-winged heavenly demon god had already fallen into Kong Shinmu's hands, there had never been a conclusion. But now, Kong Shinmu actually proposed unlocking the wings. Chapter 49-24. No matter what Xueqi was thinking, the most important thing for her now was to practice the technique of unlocking her wings. After all, the situation she was facing now was quite critical. It would be difficult for her to block the destructive power of the spatial eye with her own combat strength. Therefore, the technique of unlocking her wings could be said to be a life-saving straw for her now. Of course, even without this technique, she would not be killed by the attack of the spatial eye. However, it was inevitable that she would be seriously injured. It would be better if she could avoid being injured. The technique of unlocking her wings was not considered complicated. The main thing was that the inherited bloodline of the 16-winged heavenly demon god flowed through several specific pathways in her body. These pathways would not have been discovered if not for the guidance of the original body of the 16-winged heavenly demon god. Of course, the most important thing was to have the idea of unlocking her wings. The current royal family of the demon god did not even know what unlocking wings was. This was why Xueqi was so shocked. At this moment, the 16-winged heavenly demon god body that Xueqi had transformed into erupted with the power of the demon god. Her entire body was surrounded by pitch-black demonic aura. As the inherited bloodline of the 16-winged heavenly demon god in her body was activated, one of the black wings on her back was directly surrounded by even more dense pitch-black demonic aura. There was even a faint blood-red color. This was the inherited bloodline of the 16-winged heavenly demon god. It was wrapped around that wing. The power of the spatial eye in front of her became more and more overflowing. It was as if endless space attribute void power had condensed into a beam of light. In an instant, it swept towards Xueqi. The speed of this beam of light was so fast that no one could react in time. Xueqi subconsciously dodged. She could now move, so she directly traveled through the void and flashed to another location in the space she was in. However, she immediately discovered that the spatial beam of light was directly chasing after her at an extremely fast speed. It was impossible for her to continue dodging. Therefore, the wing on her back that was surrounded by the inherited bloodline of the 16-winged heavenly demon god directly blocked in front of her demonic body. After a loud bang, the space attribute power beam exploded in front of her. However, it was all blocked by her wing. Kong Shinmu nervously discovered that her wing had actually been disintegrated by the beam of spatial energy, and was completely torn apart in the space. But immediately after, Kong Shinmu discovered that the spatial light beam didn't continue to bombard Xueqi. Instead, it seemed to have been imprisoned in that space. Then, Xueqi's shattered wing fragments emitted demonic aura and bloodline power. There was a pitch-black aura lingering around them that wrapped around the spatial light beam. This process seemed to take a long time, but it also seemed to be very fast. Everyone only saw the spatial attribute light beam explode, and then one of Xueqi's wings was shattered. Immediately after, her black and red wing fragments wrapped around the spatial attribute light beam's power, devouring and absorbing it. This was the first time his wings had been unfurled. For the inheritors of the 16-winged heavenly demon god, Unlocking their wings was the best way to increase their strength. Unfortunately, the demon god royal family did not know about this. Even so, the 16-winged heavenly fiend celestial royalty of the fiend celestial race was still the strongest tribe among the fiend celestial race. And now, Xueqi had successfully unfurled her wings once. This time, when she unfurled her wings, she attached spatial attribute power to the first wing she unfurled. This power came from the Eye of Space, and the Eye of Space was something left behind by the supreme existence of this mid-level relic. It contained too many supreme experts' understanding of space. The power contained within was not something Xueqi could fully use at present, but the understanding and power within it was a huge improvement to Xueqi. In terms of combat strength alone, it had increased her by at least 30%. If she could fully comprehend the spatial attribute later on, it would not be an exaggeration to say that her strength had doubled. Most importantly, the spatial power that erupted from the Eye of Space was also a great opportunity for Xueqi. In the future, by comprehending the power within it, she would be able to have a deeper understanding of spatial power. It would be of great help to her improvement in the Tao of Space. The impact of this on her was obvious. So now that Xueqi had calmed down, the 16-winged heavenly demon god's body remained in the space, brewing the power of the first wing that she had just fused and unfurled. After a long time, she opened her eyes and looked deeply at Kong Shinmu. This gaze contained doubt, gratitude, and some inexplicable meaning. However, they were quite far apart, so Kong Shinmu could not carefully ponder all the meaning contained in her gaze. The first crisis of the Eye of Space had passed just like that. And this crisis of the Eye of Space seemed to have no follow-up. After the strange humanoid statue erupted with this attack, the 5 separated spaces directly returned to normal, no longer divided into 5 spaces. Next, we should think about how to defeat this strange statue. It doesn't have any obvious weaknesses, but we can try to attack all parts of its body and try to find its weaknesses. If this statue really wanted to kill Kong Shinmu and the others, it could directly annihilate them with one move. After all, it was something left behind by a supreme expert. Therefore, this strange statue definitely had some weaknesses left for them, allowing them to defeat this strange statue and obtain the hidden rewards. The 5 of them did not say anything else and directly began to bombard the strange statue. Kong Shinmu's 9 layers extreme Tao Hui Dragon Burst did not stop, constantly bombarding various parts of the strange statue's body, but it did not have any effect. Xueqi tried to use the power of the wings that she had unfurled. The part of the power belonging to the Eye of Space made her a lot stronger. At the same time, as she continued to familiarize herself with the power of the wings, her combat strength continued to increase, similar to how she needed to consolidate the grade of her inherited blood essence. In this kind of battle, it could stimulate the speed at which she consolidated her strength. It was not that the strange statue did not retaliate, but it constantly erupted with spatial ripples. The speed was similar to the spatial vortex they had encountered before. If they did not dodge, they would be seriously injured even if they did not die. Chapter 49-25. This kind of power was destructive. Once hit by the spatial ripples, it was not something that a peak Emperor stage expert could withstand. Kong Shinmu felt that even if he used the power of the brilliant ruby stone, he would not be able to withstand the power of the spatial ripples. This was an attack that was truly mixed with the power of a supreme expert. However, this kind of attack was superficial. It was not intended to kill, but to cause trouble for Kong Shinmu and the others. Spatial ripples constantly erupted, so Kong Shinmu and the others had to focus all their attention on avoiding the spatial ripples. After all, if they were hit, they would die. For this, they could only rely on their own perception of space. Fortunately, through the battle with the previous statue, the 5 of them had a much stronger perception of the power of space than before they entered the relic. The ones who improved the most were, of course, Kong Shinmu and Xueqi. Xueqi's improvement was because she had opened her wings, which increased her combat power. Also because she had integrated the spatial power of the Eye of Death, her perception of space was at least twice as strong. As for Kong Shinmu, he was constantly devouring the power of the statue during the battle, so his perception of space was also constantly growing. For Kong Shinmu, although he had not yet devoured the power of the space essence, after entering the intermediate relic, he had already comprehended a lot of the power of space. Everyone dodged the spatial ripples while attacking the strange statue. Almost every moment, they were on the edge of life and death, surrounded by danger. Fortunately, the 5 of them were the elites of their respective races. Whether it was the Polaris tribes Quan Tianqing or the Bone Imperial tribes Yuhan, they were all the best in their respective tribes in the same realm. Their combat power and perception were very strong. I suspect that many of the young geniuses of the demon god race will not be able to adapt to such a battle. Xueqi suddenly approached Kong Xinmu and sighed to Kong Xinmu. If the content of the intermediate relics postgraduate entrance examination is like what we encountered, I don't know how many young guys of the demon god race will die in this relic. Hearing this, Kong Xinmu also felt a little emotional. At the same time, he was a little worried about Chu Yueqiang and Shangguan Dyer. After all, the difficulty of the statue challenge in the intermediate relic was not low. Not only was it a test of individual strength, but it was also a test of the degree of mutual trust between the 5 people working together. Perhaps in some realms, the 5-man team that faced the statue would already start fighting each other before the statue was activated. This was not impossible. It could even be said that less than half of the geniuses in the white fog area could sense the hidden existence and attack it. In other words, only half of the geniuses could enter the intermediate relic of the statues. Regardless, our progress should be quite fast. I want to see what other tricks these statues have up their sleeves. Jiang Xinwu now had a desire to challenge himself. No one knew how many changes these statues would have, nor did he know how many rewards these statues would give him. In short, Jiang Xinwu wanted to challenge his own limits. No matter what, Xueqi was one of them. Kong Xinmu and the royal family of the demon god race were in-laws. No matter what, Xueqi was one of them. Jiang Xinwu and the demon god royal family were in-laws. As for Yu Han and Quan Tianqing, Jiang Xinwu hoped that they could cooperate well. After all, if they could defeat the statue, it would be beneficial to all 5 of them. No matter how unlucky they would still be able to obtain space attribute dazzling materials worth at least 30,000 gold dragon coins. If they were lucky like Kong Xinmu and obtained a space attribute dazzling material, it would not just be 30,000 gold dragon coins, but 100,000 gold dragon coins. Apart from obtaining a heaven and earth sacred item, such a reward was already quite generous. It should be known that even 30,000 gold dragon coins could be used to buy a few of the strongest imperial dragon weapons and dragon martial techniques. This was a reward that no one could refuse. Therefore, Kong Xinmu believed that before the final moment arrived, Yu Han and Quan Tianqing would still work together. As for how much effort they would put in, it was not something that Kong Xinmu could control. In short, it was fine as long as they did not cause any trouble. At the final moment, the distribution of benefits would not be so easy. Perhaps they might even turn against each other, but that was a matter for the future. At the very least, everyone had to destroy the statue in front of them first. This was what everyone wanted the most at the moment. The strange statue in front of them constantly emitted space-time ripples, testing everyone's ability to sense the power of space. If there was a slight mistake, it was very likely that they would die on the spot. Therefore, no one dared to be distracted at all. Kong Xinmu and Xueqi only talked for a short while before continuing to attack the strange statue in front of them. Time passed quickly, and even after an hour, no one could find any weakness in the strange statue. On the other hand, Quan Tianqing seemed to be on the verge of exhaustion. His energy was being consumed very quickly, and it was even more difficult for him to recover now. However, he still persisted. Every time Kong Xinmu felt that this guy might not be able to hold on any longer, this guy still persisted. Even though he always looked exhausted. This guy has been taking elixirs to recover his energy. Kong Xinmu could see what Quan Tianqing was doing, but he did not think much of it. In this kind of situation, although Kong Xinmu could help him and help him avoid the space-time ripples, there was no point in having such a useless teammate. Moreover, both sides did not trust each other. In this kind of situation, how could Quan Tianqing ask Kong Xinmu to help him? Therefore, he had to be self-sufficient. He had to recover his energy to continue fighting. This time, Quan Tianqing had taken a lot of elixirs to recover his energy. The total value was probably around 10 to 20,000 gold dragon coins. Of course, as long as they could continue to defeat the statues, his efforts would all be rewarded. As for Kong Xinmu, he did not have to worry about energy consumption. Not only did he dodge the attacks of the space-time ripples, but he also continuously absorbed the energy of these space-time ripples. One had to know that these space-time ripples carried the true power of a supreme expert. Kong Xinmu had only absorbed a very small portion of the power, But he had already gained a lot of insight into space and supreme power. These insights might not be of much use to Kong Shinmu's combat strength in the short term, but it would be very useful for Kong Shinmu's future development. Chapter 49-26. If he could devour all of them, the effect would be unimaginable. It was a pity that Kong Shinmu's level was too low. There was nothing he could do about it. The strange statue continued to attack them with spatial ripples for 2 hours. During this time, Kong Shinmu and the other 4 geniuses did not cause any obvious damage to the strange statue. Their attack seemed to have no effect on the strange statue. It was as if they were attacking an existence that was much stronger than them. This made all of them somewhat puzzled. Could it be that this strange statue did not have a weakness like the previous humanoid statue? Or could it be that they had to wait for a certain time to get rid of this strange statue? No! We have focused our attention on the strange statue itself and neglected other aspects. Have you noticed? At this time, Gu Xinyue suddenly said, "The spatial ripples that attack us, after we dodge them, will continue to attack outwards until they reach the crystal wall at the edge of this crystal palace. I have been paying attention to it before, and now I find that, every once in a while, when these spatial ripples attack the crystal wall, they will produce 5 spatial energy condensed bodies. Basically, this happens once every half an hour. I am thinking, should we absorb the 5 spatial energy condensed bodies and use their power to deal with the strange statue?" Hearing Gu Xinyue's words, Yu Han of the Bone Royal family immediately looked around and said, "If it is as you said, it is worth a try." Yu Han of the Bone Royal family was also very meticulous in his observation of the surroundings, but he did not notice Gu Xinyue's discovery. He had also experienced many exploration of intermediate ruins and had different experiences in dealing with different kinds of situations. At this moment, he naturally began to pay attention to what Gu Xinyue said. However, this genius of the Bone Royal family was soon attacked by frequent spatial ripples, which made him a little tired. At this time, Gu Xinyue and the others suddenly said, "After the spatial ripples attack you, I am afraid you did not pay attention to it, but 5 spatial energy condensed bodies have appeared." So that was how it was. It was no wonder that no one had noticed this. That was because every time the condensed form of spatial energy appeared, the strange statue would attack them more frequently. No one noticed anything amiss, because everyone was focused on dodging the strange statue's attack. Now that Gu Xinyue had brought this up, it was obvious that she had noticed it from the beginning. This girl's observation skills were quite meticulous. Moreover, this meant that when Gu Xinyue was dodging those spatial ripples, she still held back. Otherwise, how could she have noticed the details that the others hadn't? Even Kong Shinmu was a little careless. He was so focused on finding the weakness of the strange statue that he forgot to pay attention to his surroundings. Since that's the case, let's each absorb a piece of spatial energy and try to attack this strange statue. Kong Shinmu immediately shuttled towards the spatial energy condensed bodies and appeared next to one of them. Then, he raised his hand and released a pitch-black devouring force that enveloped the condensed body. Immediately, Kong Shinmu felt that this spatial energy condensed body contained some kind of different power, but he couldn't tell what kind of power it was. It was also the void power of the space attribute, but it seemed to have a destructive effect on the strange statue. Kong Shinmu didn't think too much about it. He directly used the power of the spatial energy condensed body to sweep towards the strange statue. He directly used this power to perform the 9th stage ultimate dragon burst, which was a familiar method for Kong Shinmu. Wasn't it just devouring other people's power to deal with them? Kong Shinmu was very familiar with it. But it might not be easy for others. In any case, Kong Shinmu used this kind of power to explode with the 9th stage ultimate dragon burst and directly bombarded the strange statue's right arm. That extremely long right arm of the statue was directly blasted into pieces by Kong Shinmu's 9th stage ultimate dragon burst. This was the first time they had caused damage to the strange statue, and it seemed like that was indeed the case. Gu Xinyue's guess was right. However, after Kong Shinmu launched this attack, the power of the spatial energy condensed body that he had devoured disappeared. This power was only enough for Kong Shinmu to launch one attack. But he discovered that he couldn't devour the other spatial energy condensed bodies around him. It seemed like the other condensed bodies were prepared for others. Most importantly, Jiang Shenwu realized that even though his attack had destroyed the right arm of the strange statue, the right arm actually recovered after a short while. It was as good as new, and the whole process did not take more than 3 breaths of time. This strange statue was too tough, and its regenerative ability was also extremely terrifying. It seems like before, we need to attack at the same time. Kong Shinmu said. That's right, but, although Kong Shinmu, you've already tried it, it's very difficult for us to use this power to launch our own attacks. Xueqi quickly transmitted a message with a somewhat bitter smile. In truth, she and the other 3 were in a similar situation. That was, they simply didn't know how to integrate this power into their own martial arts attacks. Kong Shinmu had long since become accustomed to this kind of method because he had the devouring power. But the others had not tried it at all. And it was basically impossible to absorb this power on the spot. The master of this supreme relic had given them another difficult problem. No matter what, this was a hurdle that they had to overcome. Even Kong Shinmu couldn't help them. Fortunately, this method wasn't too difficult. They only needed to try a few times to learn it. The condensed spatial energy could only last for 7 breaths of time at most. After 7 breaths of time, this power would dissipate, and they could only wait for the next condensed body to appear after an incense stick's time. If that was the case, they would need at least a few more hours to successfully break through this strange statue, and this was already the most ideal situation. Therefore, Kong Shinmu pondered for a moment and directly decided, how about this, while avoiding the spatial ripples, all of you try to use my power to attack this statue. Consider it as training your ability to use other powers? This will save us time. Chapter 49-27. As soon as Kong Shinmu finished speaking, he released the spatial power he had just devoured. Of course, he would not take out his devouring power for others to experiment with. Since he was using spatial power to attack the strange statue, Kong Shinmu would use spatial power to familiarize the other 4 with it. Soon, the 4 spatial powers that Kong Shinmu released were all absorbed by Gu Xinyue and the others. Then, they all tried to use the power that Kong Shinmu had given them to release martial skills while avoiding the spatial ripples. Whether it was Quan Tianqing, Yu Han, Xueqi, or Gu Xinyue, they were all in a very tense state. Not only did they have to avoid the spatial ripples, but they also had to try to use the power of others to activate martial skills. On the other hand, Kong Shinmu was a little free. After all, just avoiding the spatial ripples was no longer difficult for Kong Shinmu. Now, Kong Shinmu was basically dodging the spatial ripples while devouring the power contained in the spatial ripples. Whether it was a supreme level power or a pure spatial power, it was a great improvement for Kong Shinmu. Of course, the improvement to his current combat strength was not very big. After all, he was mainly a dragon warrior. However, why did Kong Shinmu feel that when he left this intermediate ruins, his understanding of spatial void power would be several times better than before? If he absorbed the power of spatial condensation, the level of Kong Shinmu's inheritance of void power would probably surpass that of the dragon warrior. At this moment, Gu Xinyue and the other 3 kept trying. At first, they used the power that Kong Shinmu had given them, but the martial skills they displayed were extremely clumsy. They could not even display a tenth of their own strength. This was because it indeed required training, and generally speaking, no one would use this ability. Only when others were willing to give you power could you take it for yourself and use it to display your own skills. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible for them to seize the opponent's power to display their skills. Therefore, the 4 of them had never tried this ability before. However, as they continued to consume the power that Kong Shinmu had given them, they became more and more proficient in this Tao. The next chance is coming. Everyone, get ready. Kong Shinmu reminded them. Immediately, the other 4 became nervous. At the very least, they focused their attention on the space attribute condensation. However, Xueqi reminded them, don't be too careless. When spatial energy condenses appear, the speed at which the spatial ripples are released will increase. We will be attacked even faster, so be careful. Her words weren't wrong. Avoiding the spatial ripples was the most important thing. They absolutely couldn't be distracted and get hit by the spatial ripples. Once hit, the result would be death. And if one of them died, they might not be able to destroy this strange statue. Therefore, nothing must happen to the 5 of them. Kong Shinmu was currently the most free one, so he was paying attention to the passage of time. When the moment was about to arrive, he directly reminded them. Sure enough, he remembered the time very accurately. Following his reminder, the spatial ripples of the strange statue suddenly became more violent. endless spatial ripples erupted in all directions. Everyone began to travel through the void to dodge. The power of these spatial ripples directly impacted the crystal walls of the surrounding crystal palace, and then condensed into 5 pieces of spatial energy. 5 pieces of spatial energy completely erupted at this moment. The 5 of them almost simultaneously swept towards the condensation. Then, each of them absorbed the power of one of the spatial condensations and dispersed as quickly as possible. Even now, Yu Han and Quan Tianqing still didn't trust Kong Xinmu and the other 2 very much. Therefore, when they approached each other, they quickly distanced themselves. Of course, Kong Xinmu didn't have any objections. In any case, it was fine as long as it didn't hinder them from destroying the statue. Then, among the 5 of them, except for Kong Xinmu, the others used methods they weren't very familiar with to explode the power of the spatial condensation. The power they released was basically only about 50% of their full power. The 4 of them were all top-notch geniuses. Under this kind of test, their progress was about the same. Then, the power of the 5 of them blasted the strange statue almost at the same time. Then, everyone saw that the strange statue's body was indeed blasted into pieces. Success! Everyone tensed up and became nervous. But soon, they found that the strange statue was still recovering. The body of the statue that had been smashed was constantly reassembling, and it seemed that it would soon be completely restored to its original state. Looks like the power isn't enough. Kong Xinmu's expression darkened. Gu Xinyue also said with some self-blame, I didn't perform well. I only used 50% of the power of the spatial condensation. Us too. Quan Tianqing also sighed. We can only continue to work hard. Next time we should be able to explode with 70% to 80% of our power. Let's see if we can directly destroy this strange statue. Just as the 5 of them expected, their combined attack this time was not powerful enough. Therefore, they couldn't destroy the strange statue in one fell swoop. To destroy the defense of this strange statue, it was necessary to have a strong attack. The 5 of them were all at the peak of the imperial realm. If they could only use half of their strength, they really wouldn't be able to destroy this statue. Perhaps the owner of this supreme relic needed them to reach a higher level, so everyone had to exert more strength. Based on the current situation, Kong Xinmu felt that if it weren't the 5 of them but other ordinary demon god clan cultivators, it would really be difficult for them to break through this level. Among the 200 people who participated in this mid-level relic, there were probably less than 20% who could pass this level. It was already quite good that 30 or 40 people could pass this level of the strange statue. Of course, Kong Xinmu also didn't know what kind of situation the others were facing. Now, everything was just a guess. Therefore, they had to continue and move forward in order to have a chance of meeting other cultivators. Then, everyone continued to train, and the most difficult thing was to dodge the spatial ripples at the same time. Once again, after the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, another opportunity finally came. The 5 of them exploded the power of their spatial condensation. This time, each of them exploded with at least 70% of their power. Chapter 49-28. The strange statue was blasted into pieces. This time, although the other 4 had only used 70% of their strength, Kong Xinmu had unleashed 100% of his strength. This time, the 5 of them joined forces and directly smashed the strange statue into pieces. Furthermore, the space ripples that the strange statue had been releasing finally stopped erupting, as if it had really been beaten to death. Everyone waited for about 4 or 5 breaths of time, but the strange statue showed no signs of recovering. Instead, 5 light spots flew out of the fragments of the strange statue and flew towards each of the 5 of them. This is a success. Let's see what treasure we got. Kong Xinmu raised his dragon claw and collected the light spot into his hand. At this time, the 5 of them grabbed the light spot and began to examine it. On Kong Xinmu's side, he discovered that he had obtained a golden treasure box. There was a mysterious pattern carved on the golden treasure box. This pattern was somewhat similar to the pattern on the statue's body. It seemed like it belonged to the same style. Kong Xinmu tried to fuse space attribute void power into the mysterious pattern. He discovered that the mysterious pattern first lit up and then activated the lid of the golden treasure box to open. Kong Xinmu looked inside and discovered that there was actually an endless space inside the golden treasure box. This is a space attribute treasure that can store things? Moreover, it seems like there was originally something in this space. Kong Shinmu was very curious about this, so he immediately immersed his consciousness into the golden treasure box. The space inside the golden treasure box was a grassland. A rather vast grassland. Or rather, it should be said that there were two grasslands. On the back of one of the grasslands was another grassland. Furthermore, on these two grasslands, Kong Shinmu actually saw some living creatures. Some small animals were running, resting, and drinking on the grassland. It seemed like a happy and harmonious scene. On the other grassland, there seemed to be some creatures that looked like ferocious beasts. These creatures were currently resting, and almost none of them moved. It seemed like they were conserving their energy for something. There are actually two grassland spaces inside this golden treasure box? There are actually living things in this space. There are two grasslands. One is inhabited by carnivores, while the other is inhabited by small herbivores. Between these two grasslands is soil that is thousands of feet deep. It's like two sides of a piece of paper, except that this piece of paper is thousands of feet thick. Could it be that these two grasslands can be connected at certain times? Kong Shinmu couldn't figure it out. In any case, he hadn't seen this scene yet. He observed the other places inside the golden treasure box and discovered that there were two gems embedded in the starry sky above the two grasslands. Of the two gems, one was shaped like the moon, and the other was shaped like the sun. The space inside the golden treasure box was spherical, and the 10,000 feet paper between the two grasslands was slowly rotating. If the two gems did not move, one could see the sun rising and setting, the moon rising and setting on the grassland. This was a simulation of a small world. Looks like the key lies in those two gems. One is a moon-shaped gem, and the other is a sun-shaped gem. I wonder what these two gems are? There's a 99% chance that these two gems are the reason why living things can exist inside the golden treasure box. Kong Shinmu thought that if he took these two gems out, they would probably be extremely valuable. However, he felt that he had never heard of a space that could accommodate living things. It would be too much of a waste to take the gems out just like that. Regarding this, he decided to ask the demon god ancestor and the black dragon's consciousness. This was all an exchange of consciousness, so it didn't take up much time. Kong Shinmu observed the situation inside the golden treasure box and directly asked the black dragon's consciousness and the demon god ancestor's consciousness. Seniors, have you seen something like this before? This is a space that can accommodate living things. Of course I've seen it before. The demon god ancestor answered indifferently. In fact, in the era that I lived in, this kind of thing wasn't too precious. Of course, it wasn't something that ordinary people could have. Only the top experts could have similar treasures. This kind of spatial treasure can form a world of its own that can allow living things to live inside. Some clans even have their headquarters in such a small world. Even your hometown, the Dragon Martial Continent, is a similar small world. It's just that the small world of the Dragon Martial Continent is much bigger than the small world you have now. The sun and moon of the Dragon Martial Continent were also created by humans. Don't you realize that? That's not a real star, just like this spatial treasure you've just obtained. Just these words alone were enough to shock Kong Shinmu. However, he had already expected this, so even though the demon god ancestor had told him the truth, he wasn't too shocked. The Dragon Martial Continent is a similar small world. The front is the Dragon Martial Continent, where you live. The back is a barren land that has been silent for a long time. In the small world where the Dragon Martial Continent is, there are also moon-shaped gems and sun-shaped gems. We call these two gems world stones. Only with a pair of complete world stones can a small world be created, and this small world can contain life. With this small world in the golden treasure box, you can say that you have a small world. You can even put all your friends in it and let them live inside. The core is the world stone. World stones are extremely rare. I didn't think that there would be such a treasure in this place. But this treasure is incomplete. This is not only a small world, but also a sacred item of heaven and earth. The owner of this mid-level relic is definitely not ordinary. It might even be the original body of some ancient big shot. Was it a relic left behind by a demon god ancestor? This was a relic that could pass down the legacy of a powerful clan like the demon god royal family. Kong Shinmu was a little surprised. He didn't think that this could be the relic of such a powerful existence. Moreover, the words of the demon god ancestor had shocked Kong Shinmu. This golden treasure box could be a small world, a sacred item of heaven and earth? The combination of the two. In other words, Kong Shinmu could use this golden treasure box to fight. What is the name of this golden treasure box? Chapter 49-29. Starry Sky Pocket World? Kong Shinmu was rather surprised. He didn't expect the name of this pocket world to be so simple. He had to admit that compared to some lofty names, the word Starry Sky was indeed rather simple. However, it was precisely because of this that Kong Shinmu could sense the endless mysteries of this pocket world. This is a saint-grade pocket world. There are 12 layers of engravings within it. Every layer of engravings that is unlocked will unlock a layer of the Starry Sky pocket world. There are a total of 12 layers that can be unlocked. I can sense that there's a treasure hidden within each layer of this pocket world. It's just that you can't obtain it right now. Who would have thought that you'd actually obtain such a treasure? The Black Dragon's consciousness also appeared at this moment and explained. All of this indicated that Kong Shinmu's current luck was off the charts. Of course, there's no need to celebrate too early. Not only is this item incomplete, it doesn't belong to you either. You should have already realized that you can't control the world's stones within it. You can't control the moon-shaped gem or the sun-shaped gem. The key that will truly allow you to control the saint-grade pocket world should be in the final stages of this intermediate ruin. No matter how you look at it, this item should be the most important treasure in this intermediate ruin, and it won't be just one of the others. The ancestral demon god's consciousness vowed solemnly, "Let's continue forward. If you can really control this saint-grade pocket world, your future will be limitless. You might even be able to establish your own race." Kong Shinmu felt a little strange when he heard this. However, the Black Dragon's consciousness transmitted a mocking thought to him. "You're thinking too early. This thing isn't just unlockable. It's just a fake. Everything in this space is just an illusion. In other words, this is just a plum that you're seeing. It's just the motivation to continue exploring. In reality, this thing is fake. I can sense that the power within this golden treasure box is a simulation of the power of space. It's not real." Kong Shinmu's expression darkened at these words. "In that case, after fighting for our lives, going through all this and defeating that strange statue, what we obtained was a fake treasure." Kong Shinmu found it hard to accept. Ancestor Demon God didn't seem to realize it at first, but after the Black Dragon's consciousness said so, he carefully sensed it, and as expected, he chuckled. "It's true. Sigh, I'm getting old, and my observational skills aren't as good as before. I can't even tell that it's a fake. It's not like we didn't gain anything." The Black Dragon's consciousness transmitted, "There's nothing special about the golden box itself, but there's a psychedelic astral crystal inside. It's an excellent material for creating illusions, and it has the power of space. According to your current value, it's worth at least 300,000 gold dragon coins." So expensive. Kong Shinmu was a little surprised. He didn't expect that he would need such expensive materials to create the illusion inside the golden treasure box. He had never seen such an expensive material in the 5 Extremes Dark Ice Holy Land, and the most expensive one was only 100,000 gold dragon coins. Just like the Splendor Gem, that thing's value was only a tenth of this so-called psychedelic astral crystal. Was it really that exaggerated? The Ancestor Demon God's consciousness said proudly, "If it really is a psychedelic astral crystal, perhaps even 300,000 gold dragon coins wouldn't be enough. This is a rare material for creating illusions. Even in this Lord's era, the psychedelic astral crystal was completely out of print. It can't be seen in the outside world. You should know that for cultivators who specialize in illusions, the psychedelic astral crystal can amplify the power of illusions by several times. It's the strongest illusion-type treasure in the world. Do you think its value can be measured in gold dragon coins? If you ask me, this thing's value is no lower than a world saint item." So powerful? Kong Shinmu was confused by the consciousnesses of these two seniors. Was this psychedelic astral crystal really that valuable? Perhaps. In my era, there were quite a few psychedelic astral crystals. The Black Dragon's consciousness said, "Little Demon God, although your era isn't too long ago, it's still the ancient era compared to now. Since it's already out of print in the ancient era, this psychedelic astral crystal is naturally a priceless treasure in the current era." The Black Dragon's consciousness actually called the Ancestor Demon God, Little Demon God. This made Kong Shinmu not know whether to laugh or cry. But looking at their respective seniority, it seemed like there really wasn't a problem with this form of address. In any case, up to this point, Kong Shinmu had completely understood. This golden treasure box wasn't much. It was just a replica of a world saint item. What was truly valuable was this psychedelic astral crystal inside the treasure box. Although this thing was produced quite a bit in the Black Dragon's era, it was already out of print in the Ancestor Demon God's era. In the current era, it was a treasure among treasures. At the very least, even the Ancestor Demon God couldn't tell that the world inside the golden treasure box was an illusion. How powerful was the power of this psychedelic astral crystal? To Kong Shinmu, this might not be something too precious, because it wasn't of much use to him. He wasn't a psychedelic-type cultivator, but its devouring power seemed to be able to devour everything? Perhaps, he could really use this psychedelic astral crystal. I'll give it a try when I get back. If it doesn't work, I'll give it to Gu Xinyue. Isn't she a nightmare mirage dragon? If she had the psychedelic astral crystal, her strength would probably increase by several folds. Of course, that's only for living creatures. After all, illusions were useless against inanimate objects. Just like the two statues they were dealing with before them. After Kong Shinmu finished studying the item he had obtained, he raised his head and saw that the other four were still examining the item he had obtained. Gu Xinyue, what did you get? Kong Shinmu approached Gu Xinyue and asked her. It's a spatial attribute radiant material. But I've never seen this type before. I don't know what it's used for, nor its value. Gu Xinyue showed the item she had obtained to Kong Shinmu with some distress. It was a spatial crystal that seemed to be constantly changing forms. It contained some strange power. But I'm guessing that this item should be more valuable than the radiant material we obtained previously. Chapter 49-30. Gu Xinyue did not know what it was, but the two experts' consciousnesses in Kong Shinmu's mind could tell. Kong Shinmu immediately asked the two experts' consciousnesses, "What kind of material is this?" The demon god ancestor's consciousness answered, "This is a formless crystal. It's considered a relatively high-grade spatial attribute material. After a battle weapon is illuminated by the formless crystal, it will have the ability to change its form. The offensive and defensive battle runes in the battle weapon can be transformed into each other." So powerful? Kong Shinmu could not help but feel shocked. If that was the case, wouldn't the effect of the formless crystal be extremely powerful? It's powerful, but it's not that powerful either. Because there aren't many battle weapons that are suitable for the formless crystal. The demon god ancestor continued to explain. For example, if your Great Compassion Heavenly Dragon Seal is illuminated by the formless crystal, it won't have any effect at all. This is because your Great Compassion Heavenly Dragon Seal only has defensive battle runes. Even if you want to transform it, you need to exist to transform it. Therefore, after your Phantom Ghost Book is illuminated by the formless crystal, it can transform between offensive, concealment, and void battle runes, but the total number of battle runes won't change. Normally, if you want to illuminate the formless crystal, you need to forge a battle weapon specifically. It can be said to be custom-made. This is because the formless crystal is very powerful and can transform into the forms of various battle runes. Therefore, you need to customize a battle weapon with more battle runes. Normally, such a battle weapon doesn't exist at all. No one would use such a battle weapon with too many different functions. Take you for example. Even the most top-notch heaven-ranked divine dragon weapon can only have 800 battle runes at most. If these 800 battle runes are divided into 8 types, each type will only have 100 battle runes. This individual effect can't even compare to the lowest-ranked divine dragon weapon. It's not strong in attack or defense, and its other abilities are definitely not strong either. Therefore, no one would forge such a battle weapon. Only the formless crystal. Someone who obtained the formless crystal was able to forge a battle weapon like this and use the formless crystal to illuminate it. We also have a special name for this kind of soldier, which is formless soldier. It's very difficult to forge a formless weapon. I wonder if there are any battle weapon blacksmiths who can forge 8 battle runes in your era. Back then, our limit was to fuse 9 battle runes into a battle weapon, which was a top-notch formless weapon. It's definitely more difficult to fuse more battle runes into a battle weapon. Kid, Even though the blacksmith who created your illusionary ghost tome has fused 3 types of battle runes into it, it's only the most basic stage of the fusion. If a truly powerful blacksmith were to fuse 3 types of battle runes, he would be able to increase the number of battle runes for each type of battle runes, thereby increasing the total number of battle runes in the battle weapon. Kid, you haven't come into contact with blacksmiths before, right? It's much more difficult to improve in this line of work than it is for you to cultivate. Many blacksmiths cultivate bitterly for decades in order to improve their skills. This is something that you can't understand. What you mainly need is the tempering and experience of battles, but blacksmiths need experience and money. If you want to improve your blacksmithing skills, necessary practice is indispensable. If you want to practice, you naturally need materials. Blacksmiths consume a lot of materials, so even in my era, there were very few high-level blacksmiths. Blacksmiths are divided into 9 grades. Those who can reach the 3rd grade can forge Supreme Experts battle weapons. The middle 3 grades are the advancement of blacksmiths. They can forge more battle weapons with more battle runes and better quality. There are very few blacksmiths in the top 3 grades. Only blacksmiths in the top 3 grades can forge battle weapons that are suitable for the formless crystal. Do you know any powerful blacksmiths? The ancestor demon god's thoughts left Kong Shinmu dumbfounded. Although the formless crystal sounded amazing, it actually had so many restrictions. Indeed, if Zhang Shenwu were to use the formless crystal on the virtual ghost book, he would certainly be able to obtain a pretty good dragon weapon that could switch between offensive battle runes, concealment battle runes, and void battle runes. However, according to the ancestor demon god, it would be a great waste if he used the formless crystal on the phantom ghost book. According to the ancestor demon god, if he wanted to use the formless crystal, it must be a custom-made battle weapon with more than 6 types of battle runes. Otherwise, it would be a waste. In the era when the ancestor demon god lived, the formless crystal was extremely valuable. It was even ranked in the top 3 among all the materials for dazzling. Of course, Kong Shinmu did not know the value of the formless crystal now. Therefore, Kong Shinmu picked out the more important ones and explained them to Gu Xinyue. Finally he said, Gu Xinyue, I have a psychedelic astral crystal here. If you don't need the formless crystal, I can exchange it with you. To be honest, Kong Shinmu was tempted. He was quite interested in the formless crystal. The value of the formless crystal was not high, but if he could really forge a formless weapon that was suitable for dazzling the formless crystal, it would be extremely terrifying for Kong Shinmu to improve his battle strength. It would not be an exaggeration to say that it was the strongest battle weapon in the world. Of course, it was not in terms of power but in terms of comprehensive ability. The formless weapon that was dazzled by the formless crystal could be used in any situation. It was not limited to defense, attack, or concealment. When needed, the formless weapon could be used for defense, attack, and concealment. It could even have a variety of different effects. There was no need to say more about the power of this battle weapon. The only thing he needed to worry about was whether Kong Shinmu could find a suitable blacksmith. According to the consciousness of the ancestor demon god, only the top 3 blacksmiths could cast the formless crystal. According to the current situation of the dragon gods, if there were top 3 blacksmiths, their status must be very high, right? It was even possible that it was more noble than Emperor Shi and the Divine Dragon. This gave Zhang Shenwu a headache. But no matter what, the formless crystal seemed to be very precious and hard to come by, and perhaps no one would be able to recognize its value in the outside world. So it was not bad for Kong Shinmu to get the formless crystal. Gu Xinyue now knew the situation of the formless crystal, and she also knew that it was very difficult to use the formless crystal. Chapter 49-31. The psychedelic astral crystal was worth at least 300,000 gold coins. Furthermore, to a psychedelic cultivator, its value was immeasurable. Gu Xinyue was an inheritor of the nightmare illusionary dragon's bloodline. She had a great need for the psychedelic astral crystal. Therefore, Gu Xinyue did not think for too long. The material that was worth more than 300,000 yuan was a priceless treasure to her. As for the formless crystal, it was a dream that she would never be able to fulfill in her lifetime. How could it be easy for her to find a top-grade blacksmith? Kong Shinmu could still rely on his relationship with Emperor Shi's mystical dragon to find a blacksmith of that level. But Gu Xinyue did not have such a wide circle of friends. Her circle of friends was several levels lower than that of a top-grade blacksmith. Therefore, there was no other way. Moreover, since it was Kong Xinmu who proposed the exchange, Gu Xinyue did not want to go against Kong Xinmu's wishes. Alright, then let's exchange. Both the formless crystal and the psychedelic astral crystal were treasures that were rarely seen in the outside world. Their value was immeasurable. To Kong Xinmu, the formless crystal was already a good harvest. The space-condensed crystal was worth more than 100,000 gold coins. If Kong Xinmu wanted to keep it for himself, he would have to give 30%, which was at least 30,000 gold coins, to the demon god race. Thinking of this, Kong Xinmu felt a headache coming on. The demon god race had invited him for this operation. If not for their invitation, he would not have had the chance to get these things. Therefore, Kong Xinmu did not intend to renege on his debt. Giving 30% of the harvest to the demon god race was a must. However, he did not know how much the demon god race would ask for the formless crystal and space-condensed crystal. Of course, regarding this problem, Kong Xinmu had an idea. This idea was suggested by the demon god ancestor, so that he would not be at a disadvantage when it came to splitting the price. And this idea made Kong Xinmu exclaim in admiration. This was a story for another time. At this moment, Kong Xinmu and Gu Xinyue were exchanging their loot in the Crystal Palace. However, neither of them intended to use the two items directly. Kong Xinmu took out the psychedelic astral crystal from the golden treasure box. Then, the illusions within the golden treasure box all disappeared, condensing into a starry blue dreamy crystal. This was the psychedelic astral crystal. After Gu Xinyue obtained the psychedelic star crystal, she was obviously very excited. This thing was simply too beneficial to her. Right now, she was suffering from not having a suitable dragon weapon to illuminate. One must know that she was about to step into the level of a super mystical dragon. If she wasted such a good material on a divine spirit dragon weapon, it would be a pity. She wanted to find a transcendent divine dragon weapon, but unfortunately, with her current wealth, she could not afford a top-notch transcendent divine dragon weapon. That was something even her father didn't have. For her, it was something that she could only dream of, but it was beyond her reach. A transcendent divine dragon weapon was worth a lot more than a divine spirit dragon weapon. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was 10 times more expensive. For those top-notch transcendent divine dragon weapons, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to sell them for 1,000,000 gold dragon coins. Hence, Gu Xinyue was both excited and troubled at the same time. Where was she going to get 1,000,000 gold dragon coins? She wasn't like Kong Xinmu, who could get a heaven and earth sacred item that cost more than 1,000,000 gold dragon coins. She felt that she wouldn't be that lucky. No matter what, Gu Xinyue's loot this time was already pretty good. As long as she could get out of this alive, it wouldn't be a loss. Hence, she still had to continue. A spatial door has appeared over there. Let me go in and take a look first. After all, my defense is slightly stronger. Kong Xinmu pointed to the back of the Crystal Palace. There, a spatial door had just opened, and it seemed to lead to another area of the mid-grade ruins. In other words, the cooperation test to challenge the statues seemed to have ended for now? Kong Xinmu wasn't sure what would happen next. His defense was the strongest, so he might as well go and take a look first. Okay. Be careful. Su Yi and Gu Xinyue both nodded at Kong Xinmu. As for Yu Han and Quan Tianqing, they were also checking the loot they got. Judging from their expressions, the loot they got this time was pretty good as well. It seemed that the reward for killing the second creepy statue was pretty good. Just this trip alone was enough to make everyone feel that it was a worthwhile trip. If there were even better rewards, it would drive everyone crazy. Not everyone could get a golden treasure box like Kong Xinmu did. So many people didn't know that there was a heaven and earth sacred item in this mid-grade ruin. If they knew, they would probably go crazy for it. Now, Kong Xinmu knew about it. Of course, he wouldn't reveal it to others, not even to Gu Xinyue and Su Yi. After all, the information he knew wasn't completely true. What if the situation in the golden treasure box was just an illusion, and didn't mean that there was such a heaven and earth sacred item in this mid-grade ruin? In that case, wouldn't he be spreading the wrong information? Therefore, Kong Xinmu went directly to the next level. The other 4 people waited where they were, while Kong Xinmu transformed into a black divine dragon and displayed the divine dragon tyrant body technique's defensive posture, ready to activate the power of the brilliant gem at any time. Then, Kong Xinmu went through the space door. As his eyes lit up, he didn't sense any dangerous aura. What appeared in front of him was an even bigger crystal palace. In the center of this crystal palace, there was an even bigger human statue. This human-shaped statue was almost 3,000 feet tall. The entire crystal palace was like an incomparably spacious space. Even though this human-shaped statue was sitting there, it still looked like an endless space. It was incomparably vast. Is he going to challenge another statue? Jiang Xinwu's mood immediately relaxed. If it was the same challenge to the statue, other than the form, there shouldn't be any difference, right? As long as he didn't face any unknown danger, it would be fine. After Kang Xinmu had a clear understanding of the situation, he retreated to the space door behind him. It was still the same crystal palace as before. He looked at the other 4 people and said, "The next level is still a cooperation test. There's a 3,000 feet tall human statue. We might have to face a statue that's even more difficult to deal with. Or a statue." After Yu Han and Quan Tianqing looked at each other, they nodded their heads. Chapter 49-32. Kang Xinmu also understood Yu Han's and Quan Tianqing's concerns, so he nodded at them and said, "You guys can go ahead first. I will follow behind you with the 2 of them." It was obvious that Kang Xinmu had just gone through and returned safely without any danger. Hence, there was nothing suspicious about letting Yu Han and Quan Tianqing go first. Therefore, Yu Han and Quan Tianqing nodded and flew through the space gate together. Meanwhile, Kang Xinmu led Gu Xinyue and Xueqi through the spatial door. As the 5 of them passed through the spatial door, the 5 of them realized at the same time that the spatial door behind them disappeared. Immediately after, the 5 of them became a little nervous. This time, they even divided up the work. Kang Xinmu and Gu Xinyue stared at the 3-kilometer-tall human-shaped statue in the center of the large crystal palace, while the others paid attention to their surroundings and prepared for any unexpected situations. However, what shocked them was, they had been on guard for close to half an hour, but they didn't notice anything strange happening in the entire space. The human-shaped statue didn't move, and nothing else appeared in the surrounding space. They were a little confused. Could it be that we need to attack this statue first? Quan Tianqing said mischievously as he looked at the human-shaped statue in the center with an eager expression. Kang Xinmu stopped him in time. "Not necessarily. We don't have to rush. What I find strange is that this space is too big and too vast. The human-shaped statue is also 3 kilometers tall, which is several times bigger than the previous ones. I have a feeling that this palace might not be for the 5 of us to challenge." After hearing what Kang Xinmu said, everyone's expressions changed slightly. "I just thought of that too." Yu Han nodded and said in a low voice, "I'm afraid that more challengers will come to this space. The reason why we have nothing to do here is because the other challengers haven't been able to defeat the previous 2 statues. To be exact, it should be a statue. Or rather, it should be 2 different stages of a statue." Xueqi added, "After the weakness of the first humanoid statue was broken by us, it turned into the second strange statue. However, the 2 are actually the same statue, aren't they? The 3,000 zhang tall humanoid statue we're facing now is the real second statue. Our partners or competitors will probably surprise us. Moreover, no one knows the rules of this crystal palace. Will it not be a test of cooperation, but a test of competition? Or a survival test?" Xuye's guesses were all possible. Gu Xinyue nodded and said, "If it's a cooperative test, then it's easy. We just have to cooperate well. If it's a competitive test, will our team compete with other teams, or will it be a free competition?" "It can't be free competition." Yu Han shook his head and said, "I have more experience. In this case, if it was a free competition, there wouldn't be a test of cooperation like the previous checkpoint. Therefore, if it's not a test of cooperation, it will be a team competition mode. Of course, it's more likely to be a survival test. I think it's more likely to be a survival test." The so-called survival test was in a space. As long as they could survive, they would be able to get the final reward. Kang Xinmu looked at the giant statue in the center of the field and felt that it might really be a survival test. "And I think it's likely to be a team survival test." Xueqi narrowed his eyes and guessed, "If it's a team survival test, then among the 5 of us, the death of any one of us will be counted as a failure. Therefore, if it's really a team survival test, We must help each other. It's likely that there will be a concentrated attack on one person. At that time, the others must help, otherwise, none of us will get more rewards. This guess was quite reasonable. Since nothing had happened, Kong Shinmu and the others gathered together to discuss the possible situations that might occur next. For the next 4 hours, they kept discussing and came up with a total of more than 10 possibilities. The probability of the subsequent possibilities was not much different from the team survival test. For every possible situation, everyone had made countermeasures and prepared to act. Finally, after they came to this large crystal palace for 4 hours, as a space door opened, the 5 people's minds were all attracted by the direction of the space door. Sure enough, there are other teams. I don't know if they will cooperate with us in the test, or compete with us. Or will they carry out a survival test with us? Let's see who will appear first. The 5 people were in a good mood. At least for the upcoming challenge, they had discussed for more than 4 hours and considered all kinds of possibilities, so they were quite well prepared. Perhaps this was the reward for being the fastest to defeat the previous statue. And at this moment, they looked at the space door, and then from the space door, a touch of fire appeared. The first thing that appeared in front of Kong Shinmu and the others was the figure of a fire phoenix, flying out of the space door. Murong Lieni of the ancient Phoenix clan. The corners of Kong Shinmu's mouth curled up slightly. Sure enough, it was her. Among so many people, the strongest that Kong Shinmu knew was Murong Lieni. The others, including Huang Yun, were slightly weaker. Even if the team could not do it, Kong Shinmu believed that Murong Lieni's personal ability was enough to lead the team to defeat the 2 forms of the previous statue. After defeating the 2 statues, they would be able to enter this large crystal palace. As Murong Lieni appeared in the form of a fire phoenix, behind her appeared someone familiar to Kong Shinmu. It was Chu Yueqiang in the form of an ice dragon. Chu Yueqiang and Murong Lieni were grouped together, so Murong Lieni would definitely take care of Chu Yueqiang. In addition to Chu Yueqiang, behind Murong Lieni were 2 genius experts from the Demon God clan and 1 genius expert from the Bone Imperial clan. It's them. Xueqi was a little surprised, but the corners of his mouth curled up. Obviously, she knew the 2 young geniuses from the Demon God clan. As for the last genius from the Bone Imperial clan, he obviously knew Yu Han. Only Quan Tianxing was a little depressed. There were already 10 people in this palace, but he was the only one from the North Star tribe. If this was a chaotic battle, wouldn't he be at a disadvantage? Chapter 49-33. The rules of the test were still unclear, but Quan Tianxing wasn't too worried. According to the analysis of the previous discussion, it would most likely be a test of team survival or teamwork. Basically, there wouldn't be any random fights. Murong Lieni and Chu Yueqiang were the second team to arrive in this space. The third team didn't take too long to arrive. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, they appeared in another direction. It was the Demon God race's top expert, Huang Yun, and the number 1 genius of the Bone Imperial race. It's Jing Luo. When Yu Han saw the genius youth of the Bone Imperial race, her expression changed. Jing Luo and Huang Yun are actually in the same team. Their team looks very strong. Kong Shinmu narrowed his eyes. Jing Luo was a name he had heard before entering the mid-grade relic. When he arrived outside the mid-grade relic and fought against the subterranean creatures for 3 days, he had heard this name many times. This was the top expert of the Bone Imperial race. In terms of combat power, he was definitely not weaker than Huang Yun. He was probably in existence comparable to Murong Lieni. His combat power was terrifying, mainly because he had an unsealed Heaven and Earth Saint treasure. A Heaven and Earth Saint treasure was already hard to come by, let alone someone who could unseal one of its seals. One could imagine how terrifying Jing Luo's strength was. Of course, a Heaven and Earth Saint treasure couldn't be used all the time, but even if it was used at a crucial moment, it was enough to turn the tide. Kong Shinmu's Blood Rose fan was given to Xiao Bai, Ran Ran, and Xiao Yuhua, so he didn't bring it with him. Moreover, his Blood Rose fan seal had not been unsealed. Even if he brought it, it wouldn't be able to unleash much power. It wouldn't be as strong as a 9th stage ultimate Dao Hui Dragon explosion. After all, Kong Shinmu already had the battle power of a peak emperor. Before the Blood Rose fan seal was unsealed, its peak battle power would only be that of a peak emperor. Therefore, Kong Shinmu didn't need to worry about that. The arrival of Jing Luo and Huang Yun caused some people to heave a sigh of relief. The main reason was that Jing Luo and Huang Yun finally had another expert from the North Star tribe. This made Quan Tianxing feel rather gratified. At this time, there were a total of 15 people in the field. Among these 15 people, there were 3 dragon warriors, namely Kong Xinmu, Gu Xinyue and Chu Yueqiang. The demon god race had the most people. Other than Su Yi and Huang Yun, there were 5 of them. There were 3 from the Bone Imperial family, Yu Han, Jing Luo, and the genius from the Bone Imperial family who followed Murong Liani's team. There were 2 from the Polaris tribe and 2 from the ancient Phoenix clan. Besides Murong Liani, there was another genius of the ancient Phoenix clan who had followed Jing Luo and Huang Yun. Under such circumstances, it could be said that the Demon God clan was the strongest, followed by the Dragon God clan and the Bone Imperial clan. The North Star tribe and the ancient Phoenix clan seemed to be the weakest. But in reality, that was not the case. At this time, a peak existence like Murong Liani could almost be compared to the other 3. An ordinary genius like Chu Yueqiang was not a match for Murong Liani, even if the 3 of them worked together. Therefore, it was not too accurate to say which side was the strongest overall. However, there wasn't much point in counting this, because when the 15 people from the 3 teams were teleported into this huge crystal palace, the 3-kilometer-tall humanoid statue in the entire space finally moved. Translator, Zephy Editor. Dio Quinn. The statue was originally sitting cross-legged in this space. As the people from the 3 teams arrived, the human-shaped statue immediately stood up. With a casual movement, ripples appeared in the surrounding space, causing the expressions of the 15 people from the 3 teams to change slightly. Everyone began to prepare. No matter what happened next, it was bound to be a battle of life and death. It was also a battle that could bring them great benefits. No matter what the battle method was, as long as they performed as best they could, they might be able to obtain some benefits later on. Previously, the human statue and the strange statue had already given the 15 people a taste of sweetness. Although the rewards were not too many or too good, the statue was only the beginning. This 3,000 zhong tall humanoid statue was the real highlight of the show. The statue is moving. Be careful of the spatial vortex. Jiang Shenwu immediately sensed the space around him. The power of a spatial vortex had started to appear, causing him to feel nervous. Then, everyone realized that these spatial vortexes were not targeting them. When the human statue gradually stood up, the entire giant space was directly divided into 3 separate spaces. It was similar to the time when they faced the strange statue. But this time, there were 3 spaces that separated the 3 teams that appeared here. We are separated. Kong Xinmu and the others looked at each other and then nodded. It seemed to be similar to what they had guessed before. This should be a team survival test? If it was a team survival test, the 5 of them had to take care of each other. Once one of them died, it was very likely that they would fail. Moreover, what puzzled them was that if it was a team survival test, why do they have to work together with the other 2 teams? Could it be that there was some kind of explanation and the existence of more rules? The spatial vortex that Kong Xinmu had sensed just now appeared directly above the 3 areas. In the entire large crystal palace, a total of 3 spatial vortexes had appeared. Each spatial vortex seemed to contain very strong energy, and no one knew what was brewing. Just as everyone was puzzled, some lights suddenly appeared from the spatial vortexes above their heads. After these lights lit up, they swept out from the spatial vortexes. It's a statue. 3 statues. Kong Xinmu's expression changed slightly. He raised his head and saw that the spatial vortexes above his head were actually 3 human statues, each of which seemed to be thousands of zhong tall. Moreover, there were 3 statues in each area, so there were a total of 9 statues. Every team had to face 3 statues at the same time, and these 3 statues were similar to the human statues they had encountered before. Moreover, it could be seen that these 9 human statues each had 5 places that emitted light. Those represented their weaknesses. Chapter 49-34. What does this mean? It's not a test of team survival, but a test of speed? Yu Han's expression darkened as he looked at the situation around him. All 3 teams are facing off against 3 statues at the same time. Does that mean the team that takes care of their opponents first will get the reward first? That's possible. Since the statues have weaknesses, let's not waste time. Let's just attack. Quan Tianqing swallowed a recovery pill. Then, the star god projection glowed brightly again. Starlight flowed around its body, and it seemed to be eager to give it a try. Don't be anxious. These statues seem to be different from the ones before. Kong Xinmu stopped Quan Tianqing from attacking. After careful observation, he said, "These three statues seem to be connected to each other. It's not as simple as we think. It seems like there are a total of 15 weaknesses on the three statues. These weaknesses are in a sequence. In other words, we have to attack these weaknesses in a sequence?" Gu Xinyue narrowed her eyes and guessed, "How do we find the sequence of these weaknesses? I can't see the complete sequence at all. I can only see 3 blinking dots here. What about you guys?" Jiang Shenwu roughly described the positions of the 3 weak points that he saw in Blink. I can see that the 3 weaknesses of the flickering are different from yours." Xueqi immediately noticed something strange. After a quick comparison, the 5 of them found that the weaknesses of the flickering were different from the others. In other words, there were exactly 15 weaknesses in total. Then what was the sequence? In fact, this was also Kong Xinmu's guess. However, it wasn't a random guess. It was a guess given by the demon god ancestor. After all, the demon god ancestor's understanding of these ruins definitely surpassed that of ordinary people. Since he mentioned this possibility, then Kong Xinmu had to consider this possibility. And the facts proved that it really was as the demon god ancestor said. They had to attack the 15 weaknesses of the 3 statues in a sequence. Most importantly, the 3 statues had spatial power. With the help of the space attribute, the 3 statues constantly changed positions, and they would occasionally hide in the void. Then, he launched an attack at the 5 people. Almost at the same time, without giving the crowd any more time, the 9 human-shaped statues immediately launched a violent attack on the members of the 3 teams. Furthermore, the 3 statues in each region seemed to have some sort of effect on each other. When they combined their powers to launch an attack, they could kill anyone. Anyone who was struck by their spatial attribute attacks would only be able to die. On Kong Xinmu's side of the battlefield, the 5 of them spread out and observed the surroundings. Yuhan soon discovered something. "I think I know how to determine the order in which to attack these weaknesses. Each of us can see 3 weak points. Although we don't know the principle, if you carefully sense it, these 3 weak points are actually different. Among my 3 weaknesses, 7, 8, and 13 beams of spatial light are gathered together. If I'm not wrong, the order in which we see the weaknesses is calculated according to the number of spatial light beams. This required an unparalleled spatial perception ability. This ability was much more demanding than the previous ability to sense spatial vortexes. This was because every spatial light beam was gathered together and almost merged into one, making it difficult to distinguish them. Even Kong Xinmu could barely sense the 3 weak points he could see. One of them was the condensation of 1 spatial light beam, another was the condensation of 9 spatial light beams, and the last one was the condensation of 15 spatial light beams. If there were more, Kong Xinmu might not be able to accurately detect them. Fortunately, there were at most 15 spatial light beams this time, right? Kong Xinmu's perception of the power of the void was extremely strong. After all, he had devoured supreme spatial power. One could imagine how difficult it would be to determine the number of spatial light beams. Oh no! I see a weak point here. I don't know how many spatial light beams are gathered together, but I'm sure there are more than 10. Quan Tianqing suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. His spatial perception ability was obviously not as good as Kong Xinmu's and Yu Han's. If everyone could not accurately sense the number of spatial light beams they saw, then they would not be able to accurately determine the order in which to attack the weak points, and they would not be able to destroy the 3 statues. This meant that the entire operation would fail. According to the situation we have now, this should be the way to destroy these 3 statues. Yu Han did not argue with Quan Tianqing. This kind of spatial perception was purely based on perception, so there was no way to train it. Therefore, he directly asked Xueqi and Gu Xinyue, "Can you 2 accurately sense the number of spatial light beams you see?" "I have 2, 10, and 11 here." Xueqi quickly said. 3, 6, 14. Gu Xinyue said it in a relaxed manner. It seemed that her perception of spatial force was still very sharp. In this case, the number that Quan Tianqing could not sense was definitely the condensation of 12 spatial light beams. Now it's clear. Start with Kong Xinmu. Attack. Yuhan said in a deep voice. This was an attempt. After all, what Kong Shinmu said was only a possibility. What if he did not use this method to deal with the three statues? The three statues had now joined forces and constantly attacked the five people. The target of the attack was constantly changing, but no matter what, the three statues always attacked the same person. They combined with each other, their power fused, and their figures constantly flickered in the space, making it difficult to see through them. Their attacks were extremely fierce. Once hit by the three statues' attack, the result would be death. Kong Shinmu could only see the weak point formed by one light beam. He directly used the wind shadow flowing cloud flash to pass through the void and appear next to the statue. The ninth extreme dragon burst out. A terrifying power instantly exploded, and the ninth extreme dragon burst accurately bombarded the weak point that Kong Shinmu saw. Chapter 49-35. Kong Shinmu immediately sensed that something was wrong. At this moment, the three statues shuttled through the void and surrounded Kong Shinmu's black dragon body. Then, boundless spatial power condensed and locked Kong Shinmu's black dragon body in this space. He couldn't escape. Kong Shinmu tried to use any methods, but no matter what defensive method or method of shuttling through the void, he couldn't use any at this moment. Hurry up, who's the second one? Don't stop. We have to erupt as fast as possible. Kong Shinmu immediately reacted. This was likely a test where they had to quickly break through the weak point. If they were a step slower, the person who broke through the weak point would face death. This was a test that couldn't fail, and it especially tested everyone's reaction speed. Fortunately, after understanding the rules, everyone's reaction speed was still very fast. After Kong Shinmu, Xueqi was the one who could see the weak point of the two spatial light beams. When Kong Shinmu reminded her, Xueqi immediately moved. She exploded with the 16-winged demonic god's super-powerful martial technique towards the weak point that only she could see, shattering it in one wave. Then, just as Kong Shinmu expected, the three statues almost immediately surrounded Xueqi. The tyrannical and terrifying spatial power continued to condense. And this continued to condense according to the previous degree of condensation. In other words, the three statues' first attack would start from the moment they broke through the first weak point. This required them to break through the weak point in an extremely short amount of time. They couldn't let the three statues launch even a single attack. After Xueqi broke through the second weak point, Kong Shinmu felt the space around him loosen up and he directly regained his ability to move. Hurry, the third weak point. Gu Xinyue directly made her move. Although it was the Nightmare Mirage Dragon, her abilities were extremely strong. It was easy for her to attack a weak point now. However, before she could make her move, Kong Shinmu suddenly thought of something that he had overlooked earlier. And that was, there were still a few people among them who could see consecutive weak points. For example, Xueqi was ranked 10th and 11th, Yuhan was ranked 7th and 8th, and Quan Tianxing was ranked 4th and 5th. If he were to break through the previous weak point, he would be locked in place and unable to move. For example, Quan Tianxing. Once he broke through the fourth weak point, who would break through the fifth weak point? These weaknesses could only be breached by the people they could see. No one else could attack them. This point was almost certain. Therefore, this was what Kong Shinmu suddenly thought of. However, this wasn't too difficult to solve. They just had to be prepared in advance. Quan Tianxing, attack me with all your strength now. Kong Shinmu roared at Quan Tianxing. At this time, Quan Tianxing was preparing to attack the fourth weak point, which was when Gu Xinyue attacked. Quan Tianxing was preparing to attack, so he didn't expect Kong Shinmu to suddenly attack. However, Quan Tianxing was only stunned for a moment before he immediately thought of Kong Shinmu's intentions. He didn't pay much attention to it before, but when he heard Kong Shinmu's roar, he broke out in a cold sweat. Without a doubt, he didn't think much about it because the situation was rather tense. After all, it was a race against time. However, it was obvious that Kong Shinmu had helped him think of that. The fourth and fifth weak points were consecutive weak points that he couldn't break through by himself. Hence, he had to let the others use his strength to break through the next weak point. In other words, the training of the strange statue had come in handy now. In fact, it was a crucial role. Quan Tianxing didn't hesitate at all. When Gu Xinyue attacked the third weak point, He waved his hand and launched an offensive star martial technique of the stars at Kong Shin-mu with all his might. A star storm instantly blasted in front of Kong Shin-mu. Kong Shin-mu then blocked it with the golden light of the Great Compassion Heavenly Dragon Seal. Immediately after, his devouring power erupted and devoured the power for his own use. While Kong Shin-mu was devouring the power, Gu Xinyue had already broken through the third weak point. She was then surrounded by the three statues, and the space power was still condensing. It could be felt that the space power condensed by the three statues was getting stronger and stronger. It was accumulating power, and no one knew when it would erupt. Once it did, someone would die. Kill. Quan Tianqing had already unleashed all his power and replaced Gu Xinyue to break through the fourth weak point. At this critical juncture, Quan Tianqing had already decided to hand his fate to Kong Shin-mu. Obviously, he was greedy and wanted to obtain the treasures that would be rewarded for breaking through the three statues. There were only 2 people from the Polaris tribe. He had to do his best. In fact, if he was worried, he could totally not attack and wait for Gu Xinyue to be killed by the three statues. However, he didn't do that. Instead, he chose to attack and let Kong Shin-mu make the choice. No matter what, Kong Shin-mu's abilities were obvious to all. He had made it this far because of Kong Shin-mu. Quan Tianqing chose to believe in Kong Shin-mu. When Quan Tianqing was surrounded by the three statues, Kong Shin-mu attacked and blasted the same power that Quan Tianqing had used to attack him just now. He then destroyed the 5th weak point on one of the statues. Before Quan Tianqing attacked the 4th weak point, he used a ray of starlight to illuminate it for Kong Shin-mu so that Kong Shin-mu could use his power to attack it. This cooperation could be said to be perfect. Although they belonged to different races, at this moment, both sides treated each other as comrades in arms. Perhaps it was because they wanted to obtain treasures as rewards, but it had to be said that Jiang Shenwu didn't have any distracting thoughts at this moment. Quan Tianqing should be the same. After all, the situation was too tense and he didn't have time to think. It was very likely that if he thought about other things and wasted a breath of time, he would fail in the end. After Kong Shin-mu destroyed the 5th weak point, the three statues actually directly surrounded Kong Shin-mu. Even if Kong Shin-mu used someone else's power to destroy the weak point, the three statues actually thought that it was Kong Shin-mu who did it. This caused Kong Shin-mu's face to darken again. This situation was beyond his expectations. It was obvious that the situation was not good. He attacked and destroyed the 5th weak point, which meant that the 6th weak point was Gu Xinyue's attack, and the 7th and 8th weak points were handled by Yu Han. Time was too tight. Chapter 49-36. This made Kong Shin-mu break out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, it was him who used Quan Tianqing's power to attack the 5th weak point, and not Gu Xinyue. In other words, the 6th weak point was not Kong Shin-mu's responsibility. Otherwise, Kong Shin-mu would have been sentenced to death if he hadn't prepared in advance. The difficulty of this test was simply astonishing. We acted too rashly, Kong Shin-mu thought, but now was not the time to think about this. He was currently surrounded by the three statues, unable to move at all. Next, it was Gu Xinyue's turn to attack, directly attacking the 6th weak point. Gu Xinyue was very clear about her responsibility. For her, this operation to defeat the three statues could fail, but Kong Shin-mu must not die. Whether Xueqi died, Yu Han died, or Quan Tianqing died, Gu Xinyue didn't care. In any case, she didn't want to die, and she also didn't want Kong Shin-mu to die. This was Gu Xinyue's opinion. Therefore, now Gu Xinyue directly attacked the 6th weak point and rescued Kong Shin-mu from the blockade. In this way, Gu Xinyue would continue to be trapped by the three statues. And when Gu Xinyue attacked, Kong Shin-mu calmly ordered, "Yu Han, you attack the side of Xueqi, let Xueqi attack the 8th weak point that you are responsible for. Then, immediately attack the 7th weak point, and at the same time mark the position of the 8th weak point." There were still many things that Yu Han needed to do. This genius from the Bone Imperial family didn't dare to be careless, and immediately followed Kong Shin-mu's instructions. First, he condensed a white bone spike and attacked the back of the head of one of the three statues. This white bone spike didn't do much damage, but after it hit, a layer of dense white mark appeared on the back of the statue's head. That was the 8th weak spot. Immediately after, Yu Han launched an attack at Xueqi. To be honest, Yu Han was more willing to let Quan Tianqing save her, but Quan Tianqing's performance was too terrible. If he messed up, she would be done for. Therefore, he still believed in Kong Shinmu's arrangement and directly asked Xueqi to save him. Then, after Gu Xinyue broke the 6th weakness, Yu Han directly attacked the 7th weakness. The next test for Xueqi was extremely serious. She needed to use and control the inherited power of the Bone Royal family to attack the 8th weakness of the statue. He had tried using other people's power to attack before when he was dealing with the strange statue. But the situation now was completely different from before. Xueqi wasn't very familiar with the power of the Bone Royal family, so it was even more difficult to use it. But time waits for no man. Xueqi gathered the power of the white bone spikes that Yu Han attacked in her direction, and then tried to explode it, directly attacking the 8th weakness of the statue. With a loud bang, the power of the white bone spikes condensed into a whirlwind, directly smashing the 8th weakness of the statue. Then, the 3 statues directly changed their target, suppressing Xueqi again. And Kong Shinmu was already prepared. At this time, he erupted with the 9th stage extreme dragon explosion, directly blasting the 9th weakness that he was responsible for, freeing Xueqi from it. Next was the 10th weakness that Xueqi was responsible for. Almost as soon as Xueqi was freed from the seal, she directly condensed her own inherited power of the 16-winged heavenly demon god, majestically smashing the 10th weakness of the statue. Before this, Xueqi didn't hesitate and had already attacked the empty space next to him. Because the next weakness was also Su Ye's responsibility. It could be said that Su Ye's performance was simply perfect. When she smashed the 10th weakness of the statue, Kong Shinmu had already been freed from the seal. But waiting for Kong Shinmu to devour was a bit too much time, so Yu Han, who had just been freed, directly took over Su Ye's power. Yu Han gathered Su Ye's strength and then struck towards the 11th weak point. The 11 weaknesses of the 3 statues were smashed one after another. At this point, these 3 statues had basically passed the test, because next, each person only needed to attack once, and there wouldn't be any complicated actions. But Kong Shinmu was still a bit worried. Would they be able to make it in time? What if the 3 statues finished condensing their spatial power and then killed him at the last moment? Hurry, hurry, hurry! Heavenly Spring Star's 12th weakness. Yu Han's 13th weakness. Finally, it was Gu Xinyue's 14th weakness, followed by Kong Shinmu's 15th weakness. When Kong Shinmu's 9th stage extreme dragon explosion smashed the 15th weakness of the 3 statues, the 3 statues immediately released a spatial power, spreading a wave of ripples in the surroundings. Kong Shinmu was no longer trapped by the 3 statues, because after the spatial ripples spread out, the 3 statues directly shattered in the field. This also meant that their team had successfully dealt with these 3 statues, and this test could be considered passed. Just now, they consecutively broke through the 15th statue's weakness, and it didn't take more than 20 breaths of time. In the end, when Kong Shinmu attacked, he felt that the power condensed by the 3 statues was about to be released. No one knew when they would attack, so Kong Shinmu also didn't know how close he was to failing this test. In any case, he succeeded this time. As the spatial ripples spread out from the shattering of the 3 statues, 25 rays of light swept out from the field. These 25 rays of light seemed to appear out of thin air, but it was obvious that they were similar to the reward lights from breaking the statues. They were probably rewards for them. A total of 25 rewards? Even if they're just the most common spatial attribute materials, the total value is equivalent to 750,000 gold dragon coins. Kong Shinmu was simply shocked by this scene. However, at this time, he wasn't in a hurry to collect these light rewards. Instead, he looked around. Their team wasn't the only one undergoing this test, there were 2 other teams. However, when Kong Shinmu looked around, he couldn't help but be stunned. He discovered that whether it was Murong Liani and Chu Yueqiang's team, or Huang Yun and Jing Luo's team, none of them had started attacking the 3 statues. Instead, while dodging the attacks of the 3 statues, they were observing Kong Shinmu's team. Kong Shinmu's team had actually become Xiao Bai's rats. Chapter 49-37. When the 3 statues were finally smashed by Kong Shinmu and the others, the 5 of them finally breathed a sigh of relief. Facing the 25 reward lights in the center, the 5 of them looked at each other, and no one took the initiative to snatch them. How about this? each of you take the 5 rewards closest to you. Anyway, we don't know what these rewards are, so what we can get depends on luck. Xueqi put forward a suggestion. Hearing her words, Jiang Shenwu nodded in agreement and said, "That's right. We were able to defeat the 3 statues this time because we worked together. Everyone played their part. If we were one less person, we wouldn't have been able to complete this trial. So, each person will choose 5, and the reward closest to them will be divided equally. This is the fairest way. After all, there are likely to be other tests later. I feel that this reward will definitely not be the final reward." Hearing Kong Shinmu's words, Yu Han and Quan Tianqing looked at each other, and then nodded in agreement. However, Yu Han still said, "It's necessary to divide the rewards equally, but for the sake of fairness, how about we each choose one in order? Let's take turns, so that we can't blame others for whatever reward we get. Kong Shinmu, you go first, and then the ladies go first. Quan Tianqing and I will choose last." When these words came out, Kong Shinmu was quite surprised. He didn't expect Yu Han to be so modest. In this case, Kong Shinmu had nothing to say. Kong Shinmu also nodded, and then randomly chose a light reward closest to him. He didn't open this reward for the time being, but signaled Su Yi and Gu Xinyue to choose another reward. Then it was Yu Han and Quan Tianqing's turn to choose. Originally, Yu Han might have thought that after someone touched these rewards, something might appear and they could see the contents of the rewards, but in fact, he miscalculated. In fact, these rewards were completely random. No one knew what the reward would be. Everyone casually picked and chose. When they were done, the other 2 teams finally began to deal with the 3 statues according to Jiang Shenwu's previous experience. In fact, the process of breaking through the weaknesses of the 15 statues could be done in an instant. If this dragged on for too long, the 3 statues would definitely kill one of them, leading to the failure of the test. However, regardless of whether it was Murong Liani's team or Jing Luo's and Huang Yun's teams, after seeing Jiang Shenwu's team destroy the 3 statues, they knew that there was no possibility of failure. In terms of battle strength, they were simply too strong. To be able to possess such tyrannical battle strength, it also meant that their comprehension abilities were exceptional. His comprehension ability was second to none in the world. As long as he saw the process of Kong Shinmu's battle, he would be able to completely understand what kind of test existed between the 3 statues. Therefore, the speed at which they destroyed the 3 statues was even faster than Kong Shinmu and the others. After all, they knew the rules of the test before challenging the 3 statues. In the end, the time it took for Murong Liani and Chu Yueqiang to destroy the 3 statues was 3 breaths faster than Jing Luo and Huang Yun's team. This also meant that Murong Liani and her team were the second team to destroy the 3 statues. When the 3 statues were destroyed by them, 10 reward light spots appeared in the area they were in. These 10 reward light points meant that each of them could only get 2 rewards. As for Huang Yun's and Jing Luo's teams, only 5 light dots appeared in their area. In other words, each of them could only get 1 reward. This made Huang Yun and Jing Luo extremely uncomfortable. Their battle strength wasn't low, but because their coordination was slightly lacking, they were slower than Murong Liani's team by 3 breaths. This was something that couldn't be helped. There was no point in blaming the heavens and blaming others. They even wondered why they weren't Kong Shinmu's team and the first team to destroy the 3 statues. But they were also very clear that Kong Shinmu's team had risked their lives to obtain these 5 rewards. Without knowing the specific rules of the test, Kong Shinmu's team was the first to attack. Although it might be because they directly attacked the first weakness of the 3 statues, causing them to have no choice but to continue. It had to be said that Kong Shinmu's team almost failed this test. Moreover, if they failed, one of them would die, and the other 4 would lose the right to continue the challenge. If they successfully passed this risk, then they would give Kong Shinmu's team 5 rewards each. Anyone would feel that they deserved it. At Jing Luo's, Huang Yun's, and Murong Liani's level, emotions like jealousy no longer existed. Each of them was a proud son of heaven. They knew very clearly that only with effort would there be rewards. Only with risk would there be more rewards. They chose to play it safe, so it was normal for their rewards to be slightly lower. Jiang Shenwu's team of 5 had been observing the battles of the other 2 teams up until now. They had a better understanding of the coordination and fighting styles of the 2 teams. Then, they finally started to check what rewards they had obtained. Jiang Shenwu directly gathered the 5 light dots and sent them into the devouring space. Then, the 5 light dots gradually dimmed in the devouring space and revealed their original appearances. These 3 are all basic spatial attribute materials. They can increase the effects of spatial battle runes by 50%. These 3 spatial materials are worth about 30,000 gold dragon coins each. And these 2. One is a spatial crystal, worth more than 100,000 gold dragon coins. And this thing, it seems to be another special material? Kong Shinmu really didn't know what these things were used for. Fortunately, he had the 2 great gods, the demonic god ancestor's consciousness and the black dragon's consciousness in his mind. Thus, he humbly asked the 2 great gods for guidance. This is just a high-grade brilliant void material. It can double the effect of the battle weapon's void battle runes, said Jiang Chen. The demonic god ancestor's consciousness directly explained, this thing's value isn't low either. However, I advise you to keep it for yourself. After all, the effects of this thing and the shapeless crystal can be stacked. Do you understand what I mean? Hearing the demonic god ancestor's explanation, Kong Shinmu instantly became interested in this thing. Shapeless crystal, shapeless weapon, those were already extremely powerful battle weapons. If he added this high-grade brilliant void material, wouldn't it be even stronger? If he really had enough dazzling materials to customize a formless weapon, how strong would that formless weapon be? Chapter 49-38. His own battle weapon had the effect of permanently increasing his own strength. Currently, Kong Shinmu's Great Compassion Heavenly Dragon Seal and Phantom Book could increase his combat strength by 3 to 5 times. These were already top-notch dragon weapons. However, if he had an amorphous weapon that had been transformed by the amorphous crystal, it would at least increase Kong Shinmu's combat strength by 10 to 20 times. Moreover, if he had high-grade brilliant void materials, he could forge a dragon weapon that could perfectly complement the amorphous crystal. That would probably increase Kong Shinmu's combat strength by 30 to 40 times. This was simply terrifying. This meant that compared to his current strength, Kong Shinmu could challenge stronger opponents by several levels. Currently, Kong Shinmu would not lose to a first-level Super Divine Dragon Warrior. However, if he had such an amorphous weapon, Kong Shinmu would at least be able to defeat a third-level Super Divine Dragon Warrior. Be it the amorphous weapon or the amorphous crystal, both were inherited from an extremely ancient method. It was hard to say whether anyone could forge an amorphous weapon now. Such a powerful battle weapon was a true top-notch battle weapon. Unless one could obtain sufficient materials from these ruins, it was basically impossible to forge a higher-grade battle weapon. Only materials obtained from the ruins could be used to forge a stronger battle weapon. The ancient materials in the ruins had far surpassed what the major tribes could usually obtain. This was why they were so frantic in their pursuit of these battle weapons. Kong Shinmu did some calculations. The total value of the 5 rewards this time was about 300,000 gold dragon coins. The others should be about the same, right? This was a great harvest. A mid-level ruin is indeed a mid-level ruin. I can obtain so many cultivation resources just by walking around. If it were a low-level ruin, I'm afraid that the value of all the treasures in the entire ruin added up wouldn't be comparable to the rewards from challenging the statues this time. Kong Shinmu sighed. Even though there were absolute supreme treasures like Saint-grade heaven and earth treasures in basic ruins, it was difficult to obtain anything good without Saint-grade heaven and earth treasures in most cases. The total value of the items in the beginner ruins was about 1 million gold dragon coins. The total value of a mid-grade relic was around 10 million gold dragon coins. It all depended on whether or not one could dig out all the treasures within. At this time, Gu Xinyue came to Kong Shinmu's side. Kong Shinmu, do you know what this is? Gu Xinyue showed 2 metallic objects to Kong Shinmu and asked doubtfully. These are my 5 rewards this time. 2 of them are items. These 2 pieces of metal look like some kind of forging material. Unfortunately, I don't know its value. Gu Xinyue said gloomily. The ruins in the 7th region of the Chaos Battlefield were older than the previous 6 regions. Therefore, many of the materials and resources produced in the 7th region were unknown to ordinary people. This was very normal. Moreover, Gu Xinyue wasn't a knowledgeable person. At the very least, she couldn't recognize many things in the 7th region of the Chaos Battlefield. These 2 are horror metals. Kong Shinmu's eyes lit up when he received the guidance of the 2 experts. Horror metals were considered top-notch forging materials in ancient times. They can be used to forge battle weapons that can contain more battle runes. These two pieces of horror metals are very valuable. They might be worth 100,000 gold dragon coins each. After all, although horror metals are precious, these two pieces aren't enough. If you want to forge a powerful battle weapon, you'll need at least 10 pieces of horror metals like this. Kong Shinmu's eyes lit up because horror metals were the best material for forging formless battle weapons. Unfortunately, the demon god ancestor's consciousness indicated that if he wanted to forge a transcendent grade dragon weapon, he would need at least 10 pieces of horror's metal as the main material. Only then would the value of the forged dragon weapon be higher, and its combat strength would also be stronger. It could also be embedded with more battle runes of different attributes. 10 pieces of horror metals was something that Kong Shinmu couldn't afford even with all of his assets combined. Moreover, such a precious material couldn't be found in the market at all. These 2 pieces of horror metals wouldn't be of much use to him. Then I'll give it to you? Gu Xinyue didn't think too much about it. She pursed her lips and said, "The psychedelic astral crystal you exchanged with me was very useful to me. The formless crystal I gave you is more like something useless. If you really want to forge a formless battle weapon, these 2 pieces of horror metals can be of some help." It's of some help. Kong Shinmu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But this is something worth 200,000 gold dragon coins. Are you sure you want to give it to me? What's wrong with giving it to you? Gu Xinyue rolled her eyes at him. What's our relationship? Don't forget. If you can become stronger in the future, it'll only be good for me. Anyway, I have no use for this horror's gold. As for selling it, according to what you said, it won't be easy to sell it, right? Although it's worth it, who would buy it without 8 or 10 pieces of horror metal? Even if someone bought it, they wouldn't be able to forge it into a dragon weapon. This horror metal's grade should be extremely high. It'll be very difficult to forge it into a dragon weapon. I'm afraid that only a blacksmith of the upper 3 levels can do it. That's why I said that this thing can't be sold. I might as well give it to you. Don't you think so? Gu Xinyue winked at Kong Shinmu as she spoke. Kong Shinmu had no choice but to accept the 2 pieces of horror metal. It didn't matter if he could find more. With these 2 pieces of horror metal, perhaps this could be considered a start. It wasn't easy to forge a formless weapon. Kong Shinmu couldn't be in a hurry. He could only slowly accumulate the materials. Who knew when he would be able to gather them? Kong Shinmu accepted the 2 pieces of horror metal and passed the 3 spatial materials he had to Gu Xinyue. These 3 spatial materials were useless to Kong Shinmu. He already had high-grade spatial materials. Therefore, even though they were only worth 90,000 gold dragon coins, Gu Xinyue could sell them if he gave them to her. It was an equivalent exchange. In any case, Kong Shinmu didn't want Gu Xinyue to suffer losses at his hands. If that happened, their relationship would become even more complicated. After the exchange, Gu Xinyue didn't refuse and kept the 3 spatial materials into her pouch. Xueqi ran over and asked Kong Shinmu excitedly, "Kong Shinmu, what do you think this is?" Chapter 4939. As expected of a mid-level relic in the 7th region. The things here were really strange. Even a royal genius of the demon god clan like Xueqi had never seen something like this before. Kong Shinmu glanced at the light that was constantly spinning and twisting. Then, according to the demon god ancestor's explanation, he explained, "This should be an ancient war spirit. It is the spirit of a combat weapon that has fused with its master in ancient times. This kind of ancient war spirit can be absorbed by your combat weapon, making it easier for your combat weapon to fuse with you." Ancient war spirit? Xueqi was a little confused after hearing this. Simply put, if you need 10 years to fuse with your combat weapon, after your combat weapon absorbs this ancient war spirit, you may only need a year or even less to achieve the same result. Kong Shinmu continued to explain, "Moreover, this ancient war spirit has actually lost its consciousness. It only exists as a spirit. The existence of such a spirit can make it easier for your combat weapon to produce its own spirit." I roughly understand now. The effect is that good? Xueqi was a little surprised. A combat weapon that needed 10 years to fuse could be fused in a year. This was 10 times the speed. According to what Kong Shinmu said, this ancient war spirit was definitely an invaluable thing. However, it was undoubtedly a pity to use such a magical thing on an Emperor-level combat weapon. Therefore, Xueqi did not intend to fuse it with his Rage God demonic weapon for the time being. Even if his Rage God demonic weapon was already top-notch, there was still a huge gap between it and a Supreme God demonic weapon. There was no need to waste an ancient war spirit now. The reason why Kong Shinmu and the others had not encountered any powerful existences at the Emperor level was because many of the materials had been taken away to upgrade Supreme God demonic weapons. For Emperor-level existences, it could be said that it was a pity to use some rare materials. Only those peak Emperor-level experts of the older generation who truly explored the wastelands would have such Supreme Emperor-level combat weapons. Those peak Emperor-level experts of the older generation would basically stay at the peak Emperor level for the rest of their lives. They did not intend to break through to the Supreme God demonic weapon. Their duty was to obtain more good things in the mid-level relic. Therefore, they naturally had to arm themselves to the fullest. If Kong Shinmu's current opponents were those peak Emperor stage experts of the older generation, he might not be a match for them at all. After all, those were formidable existences that had completely fused with their Emperor weapons. Their battle weapons and martial skills were all top-notch, and they had been trained to the peak for tens or even hundreds of years. This kind of person's battle experience was also incomparably terrifying. If Kong Shinmu were to fight against them, he might not be a match for them. Fortunately, the major races had an unspoken rule that they would not send such old fellows to compete with the young people in ordinary ruins exploration. These old guys had their own responsibilities. They either explored more unknown ruins below the 7th region, or explored some known permanent ruins in order to get more good things. Since he couldn't meet them, Kong Shinmu didn't think too much about it. In any case, he had the same opinion as Xueqi. Rather than using the treasures obtained this time on Emperor weapons, it was better to keep them and use them when they reached the Supreme God demonic weapon. That way, they could reach a height that others could not reach even when they were at the Supreme God demonic weapon. It should be known that in the current Emperor stage, other than those experts of the older generation, Kong Shinmu and the others were basically the top. Therefore, there was no need for them to become stronger, unless they wanted to explore some ancient permanent ruins and compete with those experts of the older generation. But even so, Kong Shinmu did not intend to use too good materials at the moment. That would be too wasteful. He had a lot of materials now, and he planned to save them for after he reached the Super Shenron level. And most importantly, Kong Shinmu was still not at the peak Emperor stage. Even if he didn't use these materials, there was still a lot of room for improvement in his battle strength at the peak Emperor stage. His cultivation realm could still be improved. The grade of his Divine Dragon's Blood Essence had only reached the 7th level of the Dragon Emperor stage. It was still 2 levels away from the 9th level. If these 2 aspects were improved to the peak, Kong Shinmu's battle strength would at least be 5 times stronger than it was now. This was where Kong Shinmu's potential lay. It was also the reason why he was not in a hurry to use these precious materials. An ancient war spirit. How good would it be if I could have an ancient war spirit? When Kong Shinmu saw Xueqi put away the ancient war spirit, he felt a little envious of Xueqi's happy expression. Obviously, an ancient war spirit was something that could only be encountered by luck. He did not expect to see one in this intermediate ruins. This was an existence that could allow a cultivator to quickly fuse with their own weapon. Once the weapon and the cultivator fused, they could erupt with twice the power. It was not as simple as an ordinary cultivator using an ordinary weapon. A long time ago, Kong Shinmu had fused with a weapon, but that was too long ago. Since the weapons that Kong Shinmu obtained later on were only used for a short period of time, there had never been a weapon that fused with Kong Shinmu's consciousness. Including the Phantom Ghost Book and the Great Sorrow Heavenly Dragon Seal, these 2 top-notch Divine Spirit Dragon weapons were already compatible with Kong Shinmu. However, they were still a long way from reaching the level of fusion. Therefore, Kong Shinmu wanted an ancient war spirit, but it was too rare. It was even rarer than a high-grade brilliant void material. If he took it out, it would be worth at least 300,000 gold dragon coins. Xueqi had made a huge profit this time. Of course, she most likely wanted to use the ancient war spirit herself. As a genius cultivator of the Demon God clan's royal family, she did not lack cultivation resources. She did not need to exchange some precious materials that could not be obtained in the outside world for money. Since an ancient war spirit has appeared in this intermediate ruins once, it is very likely that it will appear again. Kid, work hard. There are many treasures in this intermediate ruins. The demon god ancestor encouraged Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu did not feel too conflicted. Anyway, there was still a long way to go. What kind of test would come next? Kong Shinmu did not know, but he was very much looking forward to it now. He was looking forward to the next test and the next reward. No matter which aspect he was looking forward to, it made his blood boil. At this moment, the 3 teams of 15 people had already put away the previous reward light. The distribution was basically complete. Chapter 49-40. The 3 teams, a total of 15 geniuses, were still separated into 3 groups by the giant statue. They were separated into 3 different areas and were unable to communicate with each other. Even if they spoke, the people in the other areas couldn't hear them. Kong Shinmu and Murong Lieni looked at each other. Then, Murong Lieni winked at him, looking extremely lively. Basically, between the various teams, those who knew each other, they could only communicate through eye contact. They didn't have to wait for too long. Just as the 3 squads destroyed the 3 small statues, the giant statue in the center finally moved again. This giant statue also had countless mysterious patterns on it, and these patterns suddenly lit up at this moment. As these mysterious patterns lit up, everyone felt that the space around them had changed. Spatial whirlpools. It was still the same kind of spatial whirlpools. At the same time, spatial ripples spread outwards. Every time the spatial ripples spread in a different direction, everyone's expressions changed slightly. These attacks were still of the sure kill type. Once they were affected, only death awaited them. Thus they had to dodge all of these attacks. If it was just spatial whirlpools or spatial ripples, everyone would be able to dodge them easily. But now, the 2 were combined. This made everyone more apprehensive when they used their spatial abilities to travel through the void. It wasn't as smooth as before. In fact, if they didn't focus all their attention on sensing the power of space, they might even be affected by these attacks. But, just as everyone began to dodge the attacks, one guy suddenly burst out. While dodging the attacks, he launched an attack at the giant humanoid statue in the center. That was the super genius from the Bone Imperial family, Jing Luo. This fella looked like a muscular man. However, the power of the Bone Imperial family's inheritance had condensed into the shape of a giant bone elephant. The giant bone elephant condensed and instantly trampled towards the giant statue in the center. The terrifying giant elephant's hooves actually shook the void, directly causing a spatial tremor on the surface of the statue. Immediately after, everyone saw a layer of white light appear on the surface of the giant statue. This layer of white light faded slightly as Jing Luo's Bone Emperor's giant skeletal elephant attacked it. The light is fainter. It's a very obvious change. However, it's just that the area facing them has become fainter. Seeing this, Kong Shinmu immediately narrowed his eyes. Maybe we should try attacking as well. Yuhan immediately said. Immediately after, a spatial vortex appeared where he was. Fortunately, he was prepared for it. He directly tore through the void and arrived at a safe place, narrowly avoiding the statue's attack. Without a doubt, it would be extremely difficult for everyone to find time to attack under the violent attacks of the giant statue. Even if they did attack, they would not be able to unleash their full strength. Kong Shinmu, on the other hand, appeared to be slightly more relaxed. His comprehension and perception of space was still superior to many of the people present. At this moment, he directly followed Jing Luo's attack and unleashed an attack on the statue. 9th stage Extreme Dao Roaring Dragon Explosion. Moreover, when he attacked, Kong Shinmu released the Divine Dragon Tyrant Body Technique's strong offensive stance, and released all the offensive battle patterns of the Illusory Ghost Book. After a loud explosion, the white light on the surface of the giant statue that was facing Kong Shinmu's team dimmed. However, it was clear that Kong Shinmu's attack was clearly weaker than Jing Luo's. After all, Kong Shinmu's current cultivation realm and inherited blood essence were far from the true peak emperor rank. Therefore, his full-strength attack was still far from Jing Luo's. It was not even half as powerful as his opponent. This made Kong Shinmu a little puzzled. However, there was nothing he could do. Jing Luo was a super genius from the Bone Imperial family, who had entered a mid-grade relic. Fortunately, after Kong Shinmu, Gu Xinyue also unleashed her full strength. The inherited power of the Nightmare Illusory Dragon condensed into a 5-colored beam of light that blasted towards the giant statue in the center. Immediately after that, the other people, including the experts from the other two squads, began to unleash their strongest attacks on the giant statue. Of course, at the same time, everyone was doing their best to avoid the spatial whirlpools and spatial ripples. If they were hit, they would die. Therefore, they had to attack while ensuring their own survival. Thus, at this time, the entire giant statue was divided into 3 areas, each of which emitted a different degree of white light. This white light gradually faded and became weaker as everyone attacked. The overall offensive power of each team was clearly different. On Murong Liani's and Jing Luo's sides, the white light dimmed at about the same speed. On Kong Xinmu's side, it was slower. This also meant that the overall strength of Jiang Xinwu's team couldn't compare to the other two teams. This was a normal situation. After all, whether it was Jing Luo, Huang Yun, or Murong Liani, they were all top experts at the peak of the emperor level. On the other hand, Kong Xinmu and Xueqi weren't even peak emperor rank experts. The only ones who were truly powerful were Gu Xinyue, Yu Han, and Quan Tianxing. On the other hand, Gu Xinyue was best at creating illusions, so she wasn't very useful in dealing with the giant statue in front of her. She had tried but couldn't affect the cultivators in the other areas. Thus, she could only give up. In other words, they could only rely on attacking the giant statues to compete with each other. This made Gu Xinyue rather depressed. Her strength, which she was best at, could not be used in this situation. It was simply too frustrating. On the other hand, Kong Xinmu seemed to be dodging the attacks and attacking the giant statue. But he was secretly preparing a big move. Although he had dodged all the spatial vortexes and spatial ripples that the giant statue had unleashed on him, he had still used his devouring power to continuously devour these energies. Up until now, he had already devoured a considerable amount of spatial energy. If we're comparing which side's attack is stronger and which side can destroy the white light first, I think I've already won. The corner of Kong Xinmu's mouth curled up. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.